All right, let's talk AUKUS, because that's going to be the bone of contention here, the submarine-sized elephant in the room. Olivia Casely described it as. What is going to happen? Is the left going to flex its muscle here? Is anything going to change, or is it just a bit of noise?
Well, I'm loath to predict, Laura, about what happens on the floor of ARP National Conference. I haven't been to as many as, say, Albo has, but I've been enough to know that it can be unpredictable. But I am confident that overwhelmingly the Labor Party conference will endorse the Prime Minister's position, which of course I am 100% supportive of. The Australian Labor Party needs to appreciate that the AUKUS policy is all about our national sovereignty. It's about ensuring that in the long term, the country has the ability to be able to set our own course about our foreign policy, our strategic direction, particularly in this part of the world. But more than that, it's also a massive opportunity to improve the country's economic complexity. And that's not just important for South Australia, it's important for the nation as a whole. So we are utterly supportive of the Prime Minister's position. I'll be stunned. I'd be truly stunned if the Labor Party National Conference decided to undermine the leadership of the Prime Minister, Penny Wong, Richard Marles, who I think are delivering thoughtful, considered judgment when it comes to our national foreign affairs settings and our national defence posture.
OK, well, what about the economic complexity you talk of? You've been spoke positively about a nuclear industry here. Are you going to push for that at this conference? I mean, at every turn, Chris Bowen and others have rejected even having a conversation about a nuclear industry in Australia. Is that the right course? OK,
so my position on this, I think, has been very clear. I am agnostic about nuclear technology. The simple reality is that to be able to reach our global targets of decarbonisation, nuclear power is going to have a role to play in certain parts of the world. The Australian question shouldn't be around an ideological view of nuclear for or against. My frustration with the nuclear debate is that it has now been captured by the culture wars. On the far left, we're saying no nuclear under any circumstances. On the far right, it's we must have nuclear under all circumstances. Why can't we just have a debate on the basis of price? Let's have a debate around acknowledging that nuclear power is zero carbon emissions. Let's zero in on the debate, is it economic for the Australian context? And all of the evidence, that we had a Royal Commission into this.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. All the evidence says that in the Australian context, nuclear power will only make electricity more expensive. So, of course, I'm not going to support it in light of that information. Now, sometime in the distant future, technology and circumstances might change. But right now, if Australia decided to build a nuclear power station, I don't think anyone would do it because people will not get their return on capital, so private investment won't be made. And if it did happen, it would make power demonstrably more expensive. Now, who in their right mind possibly thinks that's a good idea?
What's your view on gas? Because we have as well those on the left wanting to basically phase out gas more quickly than renewables can fill that gap there.
Well, I would love to see a global energy market that was no longer dependent on coal or gas, because that would mean less carbon emissions.
It's not realistic now, is it?
That world doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think people here understand that?
Well, I would invite everybody to look at the global circumstance we've just endured. We took Russian gas out of the global energy mix for a period there, and all that happened was coal ended up being produced and consumed more. So we replaced gas with coal, which is, of course, demonstrably worse for carbon emissions. So the reality is that gas has a role to play in the transition. That is an undeniable reality, and if you completely remove it from the equation, you could actually have a perverse outcome on the environment. I want to accelerate the transition as best as we can off coal and gas. We have no coal in South Australia. We're investing huge sums of public money into our hydrogen production facility and power plant. That's all about accelerating that transition. But the idea we can turn off gas instantaneously, I don't want to describe it as naive, because I think people who argue this case have good intent.
Exactly what it is, though, isn't it?
But I think sometimes the path to hell can be laid with good intent, and we need to think things through and make considered judgments about what is not just in the economic interest of the country, but what's in the environmental interest as well. And gas does have a role to play.